The bathroom window was wide open, steam curling out into the crisp autumn air like a secret escaping into the night. I stood frozen in my backyard, the hose in my hand dribbling water onto my sneakers. My eyes locked on the figure inside. He was my neighbor, Mr. Callahan Jamisa, man who'd lived next door my whole life. And he was standing under the shower spray, utterly unashamed, his silhouette sharp against the soft glow of his bathroom light. I should have looked away. I wanted to look away. But when James turned his head and caught my gaze through the open window, his lips curved into a slow, deliberate smile, one that sent a jolt through my chest like lightning splitting a tree. That smile wasn't shock or embarrassment. It was an invitation. I was 24, a graphic designer scraping by in my childhood home in suburban Ohio, still figuring out who I was. James, on the other hand, was 60, a retired firefighter with a gravelly laugh and a reputation for keeping to himself. He'd been a constant in my life, mowing his lawn in faded jeans, waving from his porch with a cold beer in hand, always with that quiet strength that made people trust him. But this was something else, something dangerous, something that made my heart pound so loud I was sure he could hear it from his shower. I dropped the hose and stumbled back, my face burning. The water soaked into the grass, mirroring the chaos flooding my mind. I'd never thought of James that way, not consciously. Sure, I'd noticed the way his broad shoulders filled out his flannel shirts, the way his gray eyes seemed to see right through me when we talked about nothing over the fence. But this was different. This was raw, unfiltered, and terrifyingly real. By the time I made it inside, my hands were shaking. I slumped against the kitchen counter, replaying that smile in my head. Why didn't he close the curtain? Why didn't he look away? And why, God help me, did I keep staring? I told myself it was a fluke, a moment of madness. But when I glanced out my window later that night and saw his porch light flicker on, my stomach twisted with something I couldn't name. Not yet. The next morning, I avoided my backyard like it was a crime scene. I buried myself in freelance work, sketching logos for a local bakery. But my mind kept drifting to James. His smile, the water trailing down his chest, the way he didn't flinch when our eyes met. I was spiraling, and I knew it. I'd always known I was different, never quite fitting into the small-town mold of football games and church picnics, but I kept that part of myself locked away. Growing up in a place like this, you learn to hide. You learn to blend in. But James's smile felt like a key turning in a lock I'd forgotten existed. Around noon, there was a knock at my door. My heart stopped. I peeked through the peephole, and there he was, James, in a navy sweater and jeans, holding a tray of cookies like some kind of domestic god. I opened the door, my mouth dry, and he grinned, all easy charm and crinkled eyes. Made too many, he said, his voice low and warm. Thought you might want some. I mumbled something incoherent and took the tray, our fingers brushing for a split second. It was nothing, but it felt like everything. Thanks, I managed, my voice cracking like I was 15 again. You okay, Ethan? He asked, tilting his head. There was something in his tone, concern, maybe, but also a spark of amusement, like he knew exactly why I was a mess. Yeah, just busy, I lied, clutching the tray like a shield. He nodded, but his eyes lingered on me, searching. You know where to find me if you need to talk. Then he turned and walked back to his house, leaving me standing there with a tray of chocolate chip cookies and a heart that wouldn't stop racing. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the window, the smile, the cookies. I kept thinking about how I'd spent my whole life running from who I was, afraid of what it would mean to admit it. In this town, being gay wasn't something you shouted from the rooftops. I'd seen the way people whispered about the one-out kid in high school, the way they'd cross the street to avoid him. I didn't want that to be me. But James made me want to be brave. The next day, I found an excuse to go outside. I was watering the plants again pointlessly, since it had rained that morning when James appeared at the fence, leaning against it with a coffee mug in hand. "You're going to drown those roses," he said, smirking. I laughed, too loud, and set the hose down. "Yeah, well, they're tough. Like you," he said, and there was that look again, the one that made my skin feel too tight. He took a sip of his coffee, watching me over the rim of the mug. "You ever think about getting out of this place, Ethan?" The question caught me off guard. "Sometimes," I admitted. "But it's home. You know." He nodded, his expression softening. Home can be a lot of things. Sometimes it's not a place. Sometimes it's a person. My breath hitched. Was he saying what I thought he was saying? Before I could respond, he set his mug on the fence post and leaned closer. "I'm having a barbecue tomorrow night. Just a few folks. You should come." I nodded, unable to form words. As he walked away, I realized I'd been holding my breath. A barbecue. It was so normal, so mundane. But nothing about the way my heart was pounding felt normal. The barbecue was small, just a handful of James's old firefighter buddies and a couple of neighbors. I showed up with a six-pack of beer, feeling like I was walking into a lion's den. James was at the grill, flipping burgers, his sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle. He caught my eye and waved me over, introducing me to everyone like I was someone important. I felt seen in a way I never had before. As the night wore on, the others drifted to the backyard, leaving James and me alone by the grill. The air was thick with the smell of charcoal and summer, and the stars were starting to peek through the dusk. "You having fun?" he asked, his voice soft. "Yeah," I said, and for once, it wasn't a lie. Being near him felt like standing in the sun after years in the shade. He handed me a beer, his fingers lingering on mine. "You're different, Ethan," he said quietly. "You don't even know how much." I wanted to ask what he meant, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I took a sip of my beer, my eyes never leaving his. There was a momenta heartbeat where the world seemed to pause, and then he stepped closer, so close I could feel the warmth of his body. "You ever feel like you're hiding from yourself?" he asked. I swallowed hard. "Every day?" He didn't say anything, just reached out and brushed his thumb against my wrist. A touch so light it might have been a dream. But it wasn't. It was real, and it was everything. The days after the barbecue felt like walking a tightrope. Every glance out my window, every creak of my porch, sent my heart racing, half expecting to see James standing there with that damn smile. I was unraveling, and I didn't know how to stop either if I even wanted to. I started finding excuses to be outside. Watering the lawn, checking the mailbox, even sweeping the already spotless porch. Each time, I hoped he'd appear at the fence. And when he did, It was like the world clicked into place. We'd talk about nothing weather. Baseball. The best way to grill a steak, but every word felt charged. Like we were saying so much more. I was falling. And I was terrified. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, James invited me over for a drink. His house was warm, lived in, with photos of his old fire crew on the walls and a record player spinning something soft and jazzy. We sat on his couch, a bottle of whiskey between us, and the air felt heavy with things unsaid. "You ever been in love, Ethan?" he asked, his voice low, his eyes fixed on the amber liquid in his glass. I froze, my fingers tightening around my own glass. "I don't know," I admitted. "I don't think I've ever let myself." He nodded, like he understood. "It's scary, isn't it? Letting yourself feel something real." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the weight in his eyes, years of stories he hadn't told, pain he hadn't shared. "What about you?" I asked. "Have you?" He smiled, but it was sad this time. "Once. A long time ago. Didn't end well." I wanted to ask more, but something in his expression stopped me. Instead, I took a sip of whiskey, letting it burn my throat. "What happened?" He leaned back, his gaze distant. "I was a firefighter back then, young and stupid. Fell for a guy in my crew. We kept it secret, had to, in those days. But secrets have a way of breaking you." He paused, his jaw tightening. "He left. Said it was too hard, living like that. I don't blame him." My heart ached for him, for the life he'd lived in the shadows. "I'm sorry," I said, and it felt so small. "Don't be," he said, turning to me. "It taught me something. You can't live half a life, Ethan. You gotta choose, hide or be free." His words hit me like a punch. I'd spent so long hiding, convincing myself it was safer that way. But sitting there, with James's eyes on me, I didn't want to hide anymore. I wanted to be free. I don't know who moved first, but suddenly his hand was on mine, warm and steady, and my breath caught in my throat. "Ethan," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "What do you want?" "You," I thought, but I couldn't say it. Not yet. Instead, I leaned in, closing the distance between us, and kissed him. It was soft at first, tentative, like we were both afraid of breaking something fragile. But then he kissed me back, and it was like a dam breaking. All the fear and want and years of holding back pouring out in a single moment. When we pulled apart, my heart was pounding, and his eyes were bright with something that looked like hope. "You sure about this?" he asked, his thumb brushing my cheek. "No," I said honestly, and we both laughed, the sound cutting through the tension. "But I want to be." That night, we talked until the sky turned gray, sharing pieces of ourselves we'd kept hidden for too long. I told him about the boy I'd crushed on in high school, the one I'd never dared speak to. He told me about the years he'd spent alone, convincing himself it was better that way. We were two people who'd been running from the same thing, and somehow, we'd found each other. But the world outside his living room wasn't as kind. The next morning, I saw Mrs. Henderson, the neighborhood gossip, eyeing me as I left James's house. Her lips pursed, and I knew the rumors would start soon. In a town like this, secrets didn't stay secret for long. I felt a knot of fear in my stomach. But when I looked back and saw James watching me from his porch, his smile steady and sure, I felt something stronger courage. Over the next few weeks, we stole moments whenever we could. A brush of hands in his backyard, a quiet dinner at his kitchen table, a stolen kiss under the cover of night. Every touch felt like a rebellion, every glance a promise. But the whispers were growing louder. Neighbors started looking at us differently, their smiles tight, their eyes cold. I heard the word disgusting muttered at the grocery store. Saw the way people crossed the street when James walked by. It hurt, more than I expected. I'd always known this town wasn't kind to people like us, but feeling it firsthand was like a blade to the chest. James, though, seemed unfazed. Let them talk, he said one night, his arm around me as we sat on his porch swing. They don't get to decide who we are. I wanted to believe him, but the fear was always there, lurking. And then came the night that changed everything. We were at a local diner, sharing a booth and a plate of fries, when a group of guys from the auto shop walked in. I knew them had gone to high school with one of them, Tommy. They sat a few booths away, but I could feel their eyes on us, hear their low laughter. Faggots, Tommy muttered, loud enough for us to hear. The word hit like a slap, and I felt my face burn. James's hand tightened on mine under the table, but he didn't look away from his coffee. Let's go, I whispered, my voice shaking. No, James said calmly. We're not running. Tommy stood, swaggering over to our booth. What's this? Callahan. Thought you were a tough guy, not some queer. James looked up, his eyes steady. Tommy, you're 30 years old and still picking fights like a kid. Grow up. The diner went quiet, every eye on us. Tommy's face reddened, but before he could say anything, the Waitressa woman who'd known James for years slammed a coffee pot on the counter. Get out, Tommy, she said. You don't get to talk to my customers like that. Tommy hesitated, then stormed out, his buddies trailing behind. The diner erupted in murmurs, but James just squeezed my hand and smiled. See, not everyone's an asshole. I laughed, but it was shaky. That night, as we walked home under the stars, I realized something. I wasn't just falling for James. I was learning to stand up for myself. For us. And that felt like a kind of love I'd never known. The diner incident wasn't the end of it. If anything, it was the spark that lit the fire. The rumors spread like wildfire. And soon, our quiet suburb was buzzing with judgment. Notes appeared in James's mailbox and signed, of course calling us sinners. Perverts. Worse. Someone spray-painted a slur on his garage door one night, the red paint dripping like blood in the morning light. I wanted to run. I wanted to pack my bags and leave this town behind. Start over somewhere no one knew my name. But James wouldn't budge. This is my home, he said, scrubbing the paint off his garage with a rag. I've fought fires. I've saved lives. I'm not letting a few cowards chase me out. His strength was a lifeline, but it couldn't shield us from everything. My freelance clients started canceling, citing scheduling conflicts. But I knew the truth. My parents, who lived across town, stopped inviting me to Sunday dinners. When I called, my mom's voice was clipped, distant. We just need time. Ethan, she said, and it broke something in me. One night, I broke down in James's kitchen, tears streaming down my face as I told him I couldn't do it anymore. I'm not strong like you, I said, my voice raw. I can't keep pretending it doesn't hurt. He pulled me into his arms, his hand steady on my back. You don't have to be strong all the time, he said. But you're not alone in this. We're in it together. That was the moment I knew I loved him. Not just because of the way he made my heart race or the way his touch set my skin on fire, but because he saw a meal of me, the fear and the hope and the messy parts in between, and he stayed. We decided to fight back, not with fists or anger, but with truth. James suggested we host a neighborhood meeting, right in his backyard. I thought he was crazy, but he was adamant. If they're going to talk, let's give them something real to talk about, he said. We sent out invitations. Simple flyers slipped into mailboxes. To my surprise, people showed up, some curious, some skeptical. But there, the waitress from the diner, a few of James's old firefighter buddies, even Mrs. Henderson, though her arms were crossed tight. We stood together, James's hand in mine, and told our story. Not just the shower, the smile, the barbecue, but the fear, the love, the choice to be honest in a world that wanted us to hide. I expected shouting, maybe thrown chairs. But instead, there was silence, then questions. Some were harsh, others kind. The waitress spoke up, her voice steady. I've known James for 20 years. He's a good man. If you can't see that, that's your loss. Mrs. Henderson didn't say much, but the next day, she brought over a casserole, her way of saying she was trying to understand. Slowly, things shifted. Not everyone came around Tommy, and his crew still glared from across the street, but others did. The diner became our safe haven, the waitress our biggest ally. My parents started calling again. Awkward at first, but trying. One evening, as winter crept in and the first snow dusted the ground, James and I sat on his porch swing, wrapped in a blanket. The neighborhood was quiet, the stars bright above us. You ever think about that first night? He asked, his breath visible in the cold air. The shower, I teased, and he laughed, pulling me closer. Yeah, I saw you out there, looking like a deer in headlights. And I thought, this kid's gonna change my life. I smiled, resting my head on his shoulder. You changed mine. We weren't naive. We knew the world wouldn't change overnight, that there'd be more fights, more slurs, more nights when the weight of it all felt too heavy. But we had each other, and that was enough. We'd built something real, something worth fighting for. And in that quiet moment, under the stars, I realized that love wasn't just about the thrill or the romance. It was about choosing to stand together, no matter what. As the snow fell, James kissed me, soft and sure, and I knew we'd be okay. Not because the world was kind, but because we were brave enough to love anyway.